World Population Day obviously is something that we're keen and following a lot. This year the theme is on vulnerable people in emergencies. So who the people that we support or that are vulnerable, mainly looking at women and girls and also children. That's the essence of today, and what we're doing is really calling on the humanitarian actors to also focus on this population because they are vulnerable, as I said.
The World Population Day of this year is quite significant to all of us because we are looking at almost half of the displaced people in Africa living in Eastern Southern African region, amongst whom we find that up to about 80% of this population are made up of women and girls, of women and children. And talking of women and children, we find that the access to services and their rights in emergency settings are not always that respected as people in normal settings. Unfortunately, we still tend to look at people in emergency settings as people who are slightly not normal, not living in normal society, and we fail to live up to their expectations.
Yeah, well, for Southern Africa, the natural and man-made disasters, obviously. When we talk about natural disasters, we look at the climatic issues, the climate change affecting the weather. We're looking mainly at floods. So we have our flooding season every year from November till March. And following the flooding season, then we have droughts. So we have a paradox that's even within the same country, we can have a lot of rain in some parts and then very little rain in other parts, which causes floods, droughts, and displacement. And this really affects the most vulnerable people because when there is flooding, population tends to move from their communities to drier ground or to higher grounds or to camps. And we find out that in these camps, the needs of the vulnerable populations are sometimes overlooked. And that is why we are calling and advocating that we need really to take them into consideration and to see how best we support them through that transition period to make sure that their livelihoods, to make sure that their health status is still well respected.
And just to add on to that, women and girls are suffering a double tragedy in emergency settings because besides what my colleague has just mentioned, women and girls face already issues of gender inequalities already in what we call normal settings, and you will find that these tend to be so skewed, and you find that even for assessments and for remunerations, you would find that they tend to, again, these gender inequalities tend to be even accentuated in such a way that, for example, when you do assessments, they will look at how many houses were destroyed, how many livestock were lost. Nobody's looking at how many kitchen utensils were lost, and even when they go for recovery or for response, nobody's looking at how many pots are we going to replace, how many plates are we going to replace. So you find that these inequalities tend to be accentuated, and then even the protection issues around women and girls, their special needs like those of reproductive age with sanitary material, it tends to be overlooked by humanitarian actors. And I think this is an opportunity to call for exploiting emergency situations to be able to redress some of these gender inequalities. The current situation, as we all know, it's underreported. It is the current situation is unacceptable. Even if you have to report 2 or 3 cases, it's unacceptable. We are in the hundreds, we are in the thousands annually. But what we are saying is that this is totally unacceptable, and in conflict settings like in these 2 countries you have just mentioned, unfortunately, especially sexual violence is used as a weapon of war, which is very, very unfortunate.
Just maybe to add to that as well, just to note that gender-based violence is not only in emergency settings. It happens naturally anyway without emergencies. And we as the Red Cross, together with UNFPA, we're really working at the community level to see how best we can educate our men, to see how best we can empower the women, and also the children as well. So we're working a lot at the community level to try and educate and make sure that gender-based violence issues are going back in terms of going back to the negative.
In humanitarian situations, it is also unacceptable that in this era, any pregnancy goes untested for HIV. If we are looking at certain countries where about 40% of pregnancies, the women are positive with HIV. So if we are looking at actually eliminating HIV in our region, we should make sure that even in humanitarian situations, there is access to HIV testing in pregnancy. And not only testing, but those who test positive should have immediate access to the treatment. Okay, that is one. In emergency settings also, it's very, very important. The importance is not to distribute condoms. Condoms should be available for whoever wants to use it, because we are talking of difficult access to services. The services are not available. We are talking of idleness. We are talking of overcrowding. We are talking of loss of social structures. And so the tendency for sexual for sexual violence, the tendency for casual sex, the tendency for people to have sexual relations are even higher than in normal situation. So if you cannot abstain, you should have access to condoms. The third thing is, in emergency situations, UNFPA is also supporting to ensure that even if the health services are not up to date, it should not be a medium for HIV transmission. So we make sure, you cannot say because we're in emergency settings, we're going to reboil syringes before we use them. That is completely out of date. So we make sure that the supplies are there to prevent infection, to prevent HIV infection between patients, between providers and patients, and just to ensure that the environment is clean. And we also insist on the fact that if there must be any blood transfusion, the blood must be tested. Once there's an emergency, there is no other emergency. So we cannot say because this person was gasping, because we had to operate this pregnancy, we gave the person untested blood. This is a very, very dangerous way of doing things, and it should be highly discouraged.
Maybe on HIV as well, I think the rate of transmission at the moment in Southern Africa is still unacceptable, and there is need to do more. I know government is putting policies in place, but we as the humanitarian community, we really need to do more. And the Red Cross is looking at scaling up its actions within the community, together with various partners, together with the government, because we feel that we as community-based organizations, we're actually there where the thing is happening. So we can easily encourage testing. We can easily encourage people to go for treatments. So we will be looking up in the next coming months to scale up on some of our interventions and some of our actions within the various countries in Southern Africa. I mean, we have disaster risk reduction programming that we do as the Red Cross. And a major component of that is really working together with government, not just at the national level, but at the local level as well, to again try to bring the issues to the forefront. Issues around planning, issues around early warning systems, issues around forecasting, issues around being able to already prepare the dry ground or the higher ground, because we know the rains are going to come. So how do we work together with government, work together with other stakeholders to already prepare the higher ground so that when the rain comes, it's not an emergency per se, but people have already moved to the higher ground. And then there's less interruption in their lifestyle with their livestock, etc. So we're not there yet. I must be honest. I think it's work in progress, but more and more governments are coming to the forefront, especially at the local level. Local level is key in terms of that interaction with the population and with the community.
And just to add on, an advocacy message for all our governments: they must realize climate change is here to stay with us. These recurrent disasters have always been there, and they will be there for the time in the near future. What are we talking about? The governments need to take care of their populations. It's not the international community who will take care of your nationals. If year in, year out, from the question you just asked us, every year my country declares a state of emergency because of recurrent floods, simply means we are not serious. We are not serious. What are we looking at? We are talking about 1.2 million people in Southern Africa who were affected by floods this year. 3-4 years down the line, 20 million people were affected by floods in Pakistan. So what are we saying? We are saying that if it ever arrives that we have 1 million people affected by floods in one country, you see what I'm saying? So I'm saying that I think our government should actually not only from the disaster management agencies, but let us commit to taking care of our nationals. Because even if you want the regional levels to react, you want the district levels to react, there must be commitment, funding from above for things to happen on the ground. If not, the regional disaster management branches are ready, the district management, the disaster management district agencies, the branches are ready, but they are not prepared. They are not prepared because they don't have the necessary funding. Meanwhile, we have funding for so many other things. I think so. So the message to the governments is, can we be more committed? Can we be more committed in such a way that we don't make our countries look just disaster every year? Because it also stigmatizes. It tends to stigmatize even us as Africans. It goes, these are those people who are always having floods, so they're always crying every year. And all that.
Maybe just to add as well, I always tell my colleagues that in Africa we do not lack on policies. There's so many policies for everything and for anything. The problem is really implementation of those policies. So cascading the policies down from the national level to the grassroots, that's number one, and the funding of implementation of those policies. So I think we need to focus more on how we cascade the information down and how we fund that. And I think if we can do that, we will make a lot of progress when it comes to issues around disasters and being better prepared.
I think it all depends on the type of disaster you are looking at. If there is a volcanic eruption, like we have in the eastern DRC and in Rwanda, where maybe a whole village has been swept out by magma or lava, people will not be able to return there. A clear example is the runway in Goma in eastern DRC is halfway because the other half is lava. So planes have learned to use only half of the runway because the other end is the lake. So there's no way you can improve or there's no way you can increase it. So in this case, there's virtually nothing you can do. For drought, you find like in northern Kenya, where the lifestyle is nomadic. Nomadic simply because they are livestock rearers. And so they will move from place to place because of the vegetation. They need to meet up for the food for their livestock. By so doing, like what he said, when they tend to have this nomadic life, you find that the children and the mothers and the girls and the women, they tend to lose out on their health issues and on their educational issues because they are forced to move around because that is all the in some areas. But when you look at certain cultural issues, even if you wanted to relocate some people, Africans, my father's grave is somewhere, my grandfather's grave is somewhere. Those are some of the cultural issues, and we have seen this in Madagascar, where we have cyclones, they hit the same area every time. The government has relocated people, but at the end of the day, they come back. It has also been shown that when there is flooding, at the end of flooding, the areas which were flooded, they have arable soil that was swept out from the mountain areas. So those areas become so fertile. that you find that even when they said, okay, we'll stay uphill, we'll go there to do farming, when the rains arrive, you still find that people had ended up having farmhouses which eventually developed into another small village, and then the problems tend to be recurrent. So there are so many issues, and I think like my colleague rightly said, dialogue between government, national and regional, district level, community level will always end up in a positive solution.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. I think you've captured it quite well. Maybe just to add that people live in a particular location for a reason, and the reason is mainly linked to their livelihoods. So when a flood does strike and we move them to higher grounds, inevitably, because of their livelihoods, they will go back to their original location. As he said, we have our cultural traditions, we have our myths, and people always tend to go back to where they came from. So we've been working together with government to see how can we try to replicate that same lifestyle, maybe in somewhere that is of higher ground. But human nature, people will always go back to their origin. So it's been a challenge. What we are now saying is that let us better our early warning systems. Let us make sure that our forecast, our links to the meteorological services are there, so that when the rains are about to come, we can already tell them, okay, rains are coming, move higher, so that nothing is destroyed. They take everything with them, and then when the flooding subsides, then they can come back, so that there's little disruption in the process. But in terms of migration, people tend to always go back. Unless the place is no more habitable, then they won't go back. But as long as the place is still somewhat habitable, they will always return.
UNFPA will support the making available real-time data to support development or to support our programming, because programs that are not evidence-based, sometimes they tend to have no value. You are responding to something at times that nobody has asked for, so it's just like wasting resources. In humanitarian settings, one of the greatest difficulties, people are working on estimates. People are working on suppositions. People are doing guesswork. I assume that this is going to happen, so I want to do this. What we are advocating for is collection of real-time data that is sex and age disaggregated. It's only by so doing that you will be able to reach out to the vulnerable populations in emergency settings.
With the Red Cross, we sincerely believe that no single organization can, target and really achieve on one. So we do a lot of, and this is our principle in terms of collaboration, partnership, to really strengthen those gains that have been made. Some gains have been made when it comes to the Millennium Development Goals. How do we translate those lessons moving towards the Sustainable Development Goals to be able to do more, achieve more, and scale up on our actions? I think the opportunity is immense in Africa. The opportunity to do a lot is immense, and I think we need to consolidate all our efforts in terms of moving this forward. And I think that's why UNFPA together with the Red Cross, we're really taking the issues around partnership very seriously, taking the issues around advocacy very seriously, advocacy in terms of really bringing to the limelight what the real issues are when it comes to emergencies, when it comes to developmental work, when it comes to the vulnerable population. So I think a lot of this still needs to be done, and we will be seeing how we can strengthen our partnership moving forward in these areas.